Yeah, welcome to the Vol Bros. My name is Evan. This is my brother Rustin, who has just been named the interim Pac-12 president. We need to try to milk that for all it's worth because it probably won't last long because that conference is not going to be here for long.
Nope.
We are two Vol Bros who are actually bros in real life. Welcome to the Vol Bros podcast. We got a fun topic. Man, oh man, the season is quickly approaching, less than a month away. And so, heading into that season, we are going to answer what we believe are the three most important questions for Vol football heading into the 2023 season. We welcome you on Twitter. Well, excuse me, X. I'm assuming that still works. StreamYard still says it's Twitter, but so we're assuming that it's working on X right now, but also on YouTube and Facebook. So we'd love for you to join us and tell us what you think are the three most important questions Tennessee needs to answer heading into this season. But we'll start with ours. We'll go back and forth, 3, 2, 1. We'll rank them in order of importance. So we think number one is the most important question. Rustin, what's your third most important question that Tennessee needs to answer this season?
Well, so first, I'm going to just preemptively apologize. My allergies are trying to slowly murder me. So at some point during this, I'm sure I'm going to have a coughing fit. So I'm just going to apologize in advance. I think the number three question for me is, can the defense get 2 extra stops per game? And I went to the numbers for this, and I think it plays out pretty interestingly. Last year, the Tennessee run defense allowed 116 yards per game. That was good for number 21 nationally. Okay, so that's pretty good. Passing defense was 127th nationally. Oh, by the way, there's only 133 possibilities. So we were the 6th worst pass defense in the entire country last year, giving up 290 yards per game. But here's what's interesting.
I'm given to understand that's not ideal.
Not what you want. But here's what's interesting. We were 36th in points allowed. We only gave up 23 points per game last year. So even just a small improvement in the secondary could result in massive growth, because if you were giving up over 415 yards per game, but only 23 points on average, if you eliminate two or three possessions, just get 2 extra stops, all of a sudden you might get that average down to about 20 or 17 per game. And now you're in the top 10 defenses in America. So I think just a couple of extra stops here and there, if the secondary is just a little bit better, could be a massive improvement. You're muted.
There you go. Live television or
Yep.
whatever, YouTubing. My first question is, how are they going to keep everybody happy? And I know that might sound silly and you might say, well, people can get over it, but I think this is a genuine, it's a good problem to have, no doubt. But I mean, this is a conundrum that is not going to be easy to solve, because you think about all the playmakers they have on offense. They've got we'll start in the backfield. Jabari Small, Jalen Wright, Dylan Sampson, Deshaun Bishop, Cam Seldon, Khalifa Keith. That's 6 people right there, all of whom can legitimately carry the rock. And you might say, well, we hadn't seen Cam Seldon and Deshaun Bishop and especially Khalifa Keith. We only saw 2 of those guys in the spring game. Well, the fact that they're catching the attention of their own teammates lets you know that they're legit. Like they're Brent Hubbs, I think it was just the other night. It was I think it was last night after the Friday or the Thursday practice. So 2 nights ago, he said that they have, 6 guys in the backfield that if somebody, hopefully nobody gets injured, but if somebody does, they can withstand it because they got 6 guys that there's not much of a drop off on, when they come in the game. So that is a tremendous asset. So you've got these 6 guys. Then you look at the perimeter, and you've got Ramel Keaton, Squirrel White, Dante Thornton, Brew McCoy. how do you keep all those people happy? Not to mention that it seems as though, based on some footage that has been released and talk and everything, that Caleb Webb's playing really well in fall camp right now.
Chaz Nimrod, Nathan Leacock.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
There's so much depth out there.
And we didn't even mention the tight ends yet. Like you still got to get the ball. Hopefully, Jacob Warren and McCallan Castles and Ethan Davis. And one of the most incredible comments I've ever heard a coach say. I don't know if anybody else saw this, but Thursday, Alec, I cannot pronounce his last name. Alboli, I can't.
Ablin.
There it is. There you go. He was asked about Emmanuel Okoye, and he said that he has the potential to be the greatest athlete to ever play tight end at Tennessee. And then he followed that up with, I truly believe that. Like, he wasn't blowing smoke. That's kind of big praise.
So earlier this week, after Ablin made that comment on the Eric Ainge show, they actually took his measurables and compared it to the NFL Combine. And he is right now, he would have the best measurables of any tight end that's ever gone through the Combine. He's only been playing for a year.
Wow. So, I mean, that's very encouraging for the future. I mean, I highly doubt he'll see the field very much this year. But, I mean, you got Jacob Warren and McCallan Castles that are going to handle that. Probably 90% of the snaps are going to be those guys. But, I mean, we just mentioned 6 running backs, 6 or 7 wide receivers, and 2 or 3 tight ends. So at least 15 people. I mean, you could say, well, okay, the 3 freshman running backs, they know it's not their time yet. I get that.
You're going to see Cam Seldon. He's going to play.
Guarantee it, yeah.
I think Deshaun Bishop and Khalifa Keith will probably redshirt, but you're going to see Cam Seldon.
So, I mean, that's 12 to 13 guys, playmakers, that they're going to be trying to get the ball to. Let's see here. Before we go on to our next question, any comments came in about that? The only 10 you say, hey, welcome. We're glad to have you back with us. They said she said we're also 15th nationally in points per play. That's a good stat right there. She said, I think the yards per game will always be high. Teams will mostly be playing catch up. 100%. I totally agree. We play a bend but don't break defense that baits the throw and then tightens up as the field shrinks.
Yep.
And I think what that comment right there, exactly what Rustin said of, we're allowing all these passing yards per game, but very few rushing yards and relatively few points. And so I think the only 10 you see is exactly right. They're throwing the ball to get in the red zone, and then everything tightens up. And then you got to run it, and we can stop the run. So I think that's a good point. Zach said Joe Milton will do great things this year. Welcome, Zach. Good to have you with us, buddy. And Zach just asked another question that we'll get to here in a little bit. Rustin, what is your second most important question that you think Tennessee needs to answer?
How many snaps can the backup linebackers play? College football is a long season. It doesn't matter what conference you're in. You're going to get dinged up. You're going to get little bumps and bruises. Stuff's just going to happen. And we need Keenan Peely and Aaron Beasley to be full go in the games that matter. The only way that can happen is if some combination, and the early reports have been interesting. They're talking a lot about Arian Carter, but they're also talking a lot about Caleb Perry, which is really interesting. He's kind of stepped up, and he was kind of unexpected. Like he's played some snaps in the past, but it's mostly been mop up duty. I think if you had asked the coaches going into the year, they probably were expecting Elijah Herring to take a big step, and some combination of Arian Carter or Jeremiah Telander, but nobody was really talking about Caleb Perry. And for whatever reason, he's getting a lot of pub right now. So, I think that's a huge positive. If they can get Elijah Herring, Caleb Perry, and Arian Carter all playing significant snaps, that just makes Aaron Beasley and Keenan Peely significantly better.
100% agree. And I think that is a fantastic second question. And actually, one of the things you just mentioned in the second half of our show, we're going to talk about, what people are saying from fall camp so far, who's shining, that kind of stuff. What you just mentioned is one of the things that I was going to bring up during that time. So I'm glad you said that. My number two most important question that I think Tennessee has to answer heading into this season is who's going to be the backup to Cooper Mays. This is it. Obviously, people might say, well, I mean, you could slide over a guard like they did last year or all this kind of stuff. But Jerome Carvin isn't on this team. He's not here anymore. This is a big deal because center is arguably the most important position on the offensive line in this offense. You will, if you go back and watch any game, the first person on the ball is Cooper Mays, and he's helping get the offensive line lined up. He's getting everybody up there with him. He and the quarterback in this year will be Joe Milton. They're setting the tone for the speed of this offense every play. It is vitally important to have somebody back there that you can rely on, who understands this offense, who understands their role in the offense as the center. It's a big deal. It's a tremendously important position. They're touching the ball every single play. So you got to have somebody you can trust that's going to be there. It'll be interesting to see who it is.
And in this offense, they call the initial block scheme. So it's got to be somebody who understands what they're trying to do. Right now, Addison Nichols is getting all the second team center snaps, which I'm good with. He was in the system all year last year. He got the red shirt. He spent a lot of time just listening and learning. He's a baller. Kid's a big physical kid. He was a 4-star coming out of high school, highly regarded. So I think he's a smart kid, came out of Greater Atlanta Christian in Atlanta. I think he could actually do very well there.
And it shows that the staff trusts him because, whoever you put there, you have to be able to trust them, that they're going to know what to do, the speed at which to go. They have to be able to be trusted. Let's see here. Zach said Cooper Mays is the backup to Yeah.
Let's hope that's not true. There was one up above. Somebody from Michigan posted their top 3 questions.
Yes, I see that. Well, I'll tell you what, let's finish ours and then we'll go back and show everybody's top 3 questions. Just good. A man in Michigan did say T. Laner and Carter are going to be special. I hope so. It sounds like it. I hope you're exactly right. By the way, welcome from Michigan. That's what I'm talking about. So our number 1 question that we think is the most important question for Tennessee. Rustin, what is your most important question for Tennessee heading into this year?
It's the question that everybody's wondering and nobody wants to talk about. Is Nico ready? Again, it's a long season. You get bumps and bruises, stuff happens. For us to think that an SEC quarterback is going to go through the entire season unscathed, it'd be nice if they do, but that's rare when it happens. So I think we have to prepare our minds for there's a high probability that at some point this season, Joe Milton may miss a game. And if he does, is Nico ready to go? I think that's a huge question. You got all those guys around him. I think, everybody's saying the right things. It sounds like he's doing all the things he should, but it's different when the bullets start flying. Yeah. Even more terrifying than that, Gaston Moore is 2 plays away from being our starting quarterback.
He can sling it.
Just saying, and as a coach, that's how you have to look at it. That backup is 1 play away. And unfortunately, in this scenario, Gaston Moore is 2 plays away. That one's a little concerning. So I'll be curious to see, especially early, if they, typically you put your backup in when you get a big lead. I'll be curious to see if early on, if they put him in a little earlier than normal and try to get him some reps against some quality competition just in case.
What would be ideal is if what would be ideal is if he plays the whole fourth quarter against Virginia. That would be ideal. And just side note, just if there's any Virginia fans watching, the game is actually not in Neyland Stadium. It's in Nashville at Nissan Stadium. There was some confusion amongst the Virginia fan base on Twitter or X. It's going to be very difficult to call it X on here. I'm not used to that yet. But hopefully he gets to play the whole fourth quarter against Virginia. My number one question, and we mentioned on here multiple times, is the secondary better? Just because you're 1 year older doesn't mean you're 1 year better. And my goodness, they've got a plethora of experience and redshirt seniors and super seniors. They have a plethora in the secondary. I would almost guarantee they are the oldest secondary in all of college football. They have so much experience there. But just because you're 1 year older doesn't mean you're 1 year better. They are still the same athletes that have been playing the last few years. One interesting thing that was brought up on VolQuest on their 2-minute drill the other day was they said it sounds like Danico Slaughter, the way it looks is he is one of the corners. Like there's no doubt he's one of the guys. And so, if that's good that he's established himself that way, because if Gabe Jeudy-Lally can establish himself on the other side, which that's one interesting thing is I haven't heard his name hardly at all coming out of fall camp so far. And so, if Gabe Jeudy-Lally can establish himself on the other side, that's two very important positions. And so can the secondary be better? Because as Rustin mentioned earlier, that's been the thing that this past year was the biggest struggle. And so that's in my opinion is the number one question. It's the most important question. They gotta be ready. And like Rustin said, Nico, he's only one play away. He's one play away from taking snaps. So those are our top three. Let's see what you guys said.
Nico might actually, if Vegas is right, Nico might actually get the entire second half against Virginia because right now we're awesome. 28-point favorites. So
that would be awesome. Just a man in Michigan said his number one question is Joe Milton the guy? And I get that. I mean, we're working on a small sample size of success as far as Vanderbilt and the Orange Bowl. Before that, in starting roles, it wasn't the greatest, but as I think we could all see over the course of the season last year, especially against Missouri and other teams, he took major strides. And, one thing that I think was interesting was when he was asked, why didn't you leave this summer? He said, I was getting better here. And so he can see it too. And so I'm hoping, I hope he is.
I think we already know he is. I think, coaches just by sheer nature of their job and the fragility of their job are extremely paranoid by nature. And they don't like hyperbole. They don't like a bunch of fanfare unless they know somebody's going to back it up. And the amount of PR and fanfare that has been around Joe Milton in the last 2 months, and let's not get it twisted here. The coaching staff has to allow that. The sports information office has to allow that. Like nobody gets to just shoot these videos and put them out there without permission. So the fact that the coaching staff has allowed Joe to be front and center so much over the last 2 months. I mean, day one of practice, they mic'd him up.
Yep.
Sure did. I mean, that's an incredible sign of their confidence in him. Like they are, I don't think they're concerned about him at all.
I loved the breakdown that the quarterbacks did. He goes 1, 2, 3 slang.
Slang on 3.
Yeah, I love it, man. It was great. And I love what he told him. He said, you got to take care of the ball and take care of your teammates. And he said, if people aren't where they're supposed to be, it's our job to get them there. That's part of wearing the red shirt. Like we're in the red jersey. I loved that. That was great. Just a man in Michigan said his number 2 most important question is, can we rush 4 and get to the quarterback consistently? Oh, great question. That is a great question. And based on some early reviews in fall camp, it sounds like the defensive line is getting after it. So I love to hear that. And then he said number 3, oh, this is a good one too. This is a great question. Is the offensive line as good as last year? Oh man, what a great question. Because let's be honest. I mean, we're all sitting here talking about Joe Milton throwing the ball 70, 80, 90 yards. Okay, if you're going to throw the ball 90 yards, that means the offensive line has to block for multiple seconds, like several seconds. And so I think that's a great question. I have, obvious concerns about that too. However, it's incredibly encouraging to hear the rave reviews of John Campbell coming out of fall camp so far. So hopefully they are as good. Hopefully.
I don't think they'll be. I don't think there's as many NFL prospects, but I think they'll be solid. And I think the biggest indicator of how good they'll be is Ollie Lane has been getting every rep at first team left guard. Okay. Andre Carrick is not in the starting group. And that tells me, everybody talks about Glenn Ellerbe as this unbelievable developer of linemen. And don't forget, Georgia tried to hire him away in the offseason. Like he knows what he's doing. The fact that Ollie Lane has learned so much and developed so well under Glenn Ellerbe that he has taken that job from Andre Carrick tells me a lot about the development of our offensive line.
Yeah. And or let's hope it's not the opposite and that Carrick was cracked up to be.
People who know what they're looking at, who know line play, swore by Andre Carrick. So I don't think that's the case. Another one that's interesting, as of now, Jeremiah Crawford is beating out Gerald Mincy. Jeremiah Crawford's been taking all the first team reps at right tackle. So it's interesting. They've got some depth there. They've got some movable pieces. They got guys that can move around. Again, not a whole lot of NFL talent, but I think they'll be very solid.
One of Zach's questions going into this year was, will Dante Thornton be the next Jalen Hyatt? And I'm going to say, yeah, based on what we've seen so far and what we've heard from coaches and interviews and stuff. I mean, obviously it's hard to just walk in and be like, yeah, I'm going to be a Biletnikoff winner, but this offense is very helpful for that. And I'm going to go to what Joey Halsley said in his his Tennessee Media Day presser. Somebody asked him about Dante Thornton, and he said, "Yeah, that dude's rare." And he said, there's good there. You have guys that are good, but then he goes like this was saying. He goes, then you have guys who are rare skills, who have rare talent, and he goes, Dante has rare skills for his size. And I was like, well, that's good to hear. That is a nice thing to hear. So hearing that review, I would have to say, yes, it sounds like he will be. Let's see here. Oh, Just a Man in Michigan said, I actually don't live in Michigan anymore. I left the frozen wasteland 6 months ago. Well, wherever you're tuning in from, we really appreciate it. Absolutely. We sure do. Zach said Joe Milton's going to win the Heisman this year, so no need for Nico this year unless it's garbage time. Let's see.
Gotta disagree there. Like he is one play away. He needs as many snaps as he can get when it matters.
Zach is giving out great advice in the comments. I love it. He said, smash the like button. I like that, Zach. That's great. That's great advice. I think everybody should do that and subscribe if you haven't. That'd be awesome. Let's see. The only 10 you see, she said, I'm so glad we got to see you again. That's awesome. She said, if Nico isn't ready, do you have any faith in Gaston Moore? He looks really good to me. So I do. Rustin is not. I'm a huge Gaston Moore fan. I think the dude's great. He can sling it, man. He can throw it. And that's what I love about him.
I think he's an adequate game manager. I think he has enough guys around him and he's smart enough, and the coaching staff is smart enough to put him in position to be successful. Points per game will definitely drop. He doesn't have the explosive ability that Joe or Nico has. Sure. But he'll get the ball to the right people in the right spots. And, if they all produce at a higher level and pick up for his lack of ability, then he can still win games for us. But let's hope we don't have to see that.
I would rather have Gaston Moore than like Justin Worley. I think we got an upgrade there.
Not sure about that.
Zach said his 3 questions were: how many points do we give up per game? And hopefully that's similar to last year or fewer. What will the running backs be like? They will be running all over the field. I'll tell you what, if Cam Seldon and Dylan Sampson can pick up block schemes, they're going to be on the field. Like, once again, how are you going to keep everybody happy?
I'll go ahead and say it. I think we have the best running back room in the country.
I mean, it's got to be the deepest.
And that's not being a Tennessee homer. I watch everybody else. I know what everybody else has. I don't think anybody. We have legit 4 guys out of those 6 that will end up playing in the NFL. Tell me another running back room in America right now that has 4 guys that are absolutely going to make it to the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, we're 6 deep basically. I mean, it's a plethora of riches back there. It's the deepest backfield room we've had in a long, long time.
Yeah.
He's also said, how many points do we win by versus Bama and Georgia? Hey, as long as it's 1, that's enough. That's enough. Absolutely. Let's see. Just a Man of Michigan said, I really want Joe to be the guy. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think the dude has put on enough weight yet to last in the SEC. So he's a big fella. He is, and he said by the dude, I mean Nico. Well, I agree there. He's got I think he knows that too. He knows he's got to put on some weight because 350-pound folks, defensive ends and interior linemen, they hurt when they hit you. And so I think he knows he's got to put on some weight.
They're listing him at 206 now. So he's gained 10 pounds since high school. So that's good, but it's still probably not enough.
He said, have y'all seen Shem Umarov? That dude looks like the mountain from Game of Thrones. He's a large individual.
Yeah, if y'all go back and watch our offensive line preview, we talk about him. I've actually seen him in person when he was in high school. He played at Denmark High School in North Atlanta. And even then, like, he dwarfed everybody else on the field. And there were other Division I players on the field, and he was just significantly better than bigger than everybody else. It was mind-blowing when that dude would walk up. And even when he took his pads off, like you would kind of sit there and look at him and go, I could have sworn he took his shoulder pads off. Because it didn't change. He was still just enormous.
Zach said, no, his real third question is, will Dante Thornton live up to the hype? I mean, I think he's going to, but that's just me.
Well, the beauty of it is he doesn't really have to. Like, even if he's just a flash here and there and gives us a boost here and there, like, everybody's talking about Dante Thornton and they're forgetting Squirrel White's still starting in front of him. Like, Dante Thornton is a freak athlete. He's a rare player, but he's not starting right now.
Well, what's incredible about this offense is, and I was talking to a guy this morning about this, but when Tennessee steps on the field, let's say they get pinned on their own 1 yard line by a really great punt. As soon as they step on the field, they're within scoring range. That's what's crazy, because all they have to say is, hey, Squirrel, or hey, Dante, go run past everyone and Joe, throw it to him. And that's, I mean, what a luxury. And that sounds so simplistic, but that's the way it is. like that's reality. That's the way it was last year with Jalen Hyatt. I mean, you look at the LSU game when Hyatt had that huge touchdown catch in the first half, that go route, hitting through a beautiful ball. I mean, he just ran past everybody. That's all he did. He just ran past. When I said that, when we were talking about the best plays of the year in that video, I mentioned that play looked like when Jalen Hyatt was a freshman in Neyland Stadium against Alabama, and he ran straight past the number 9 overall draft pick that year, Patrick Surtain Jr., just burned him by a step and a half for a touchdown pass. That's what we got this year. We saw that against Vanderbilt. We saw that against Clemson. They said, "Squirrel, go be fast." And he outran them both. I mean, like, as soon as they step on the field, they're within scoring range.
Well,
that's what's going to be so fun to watch.
The other thing you get with that is you also get the ability to send everybody on 4 verticals. And, you know, the defense, the secondary is already going to be playing soft coverage and playing off because they don't want to get run by. So you send everybody on 4 verticals and take the entire secondary 25, 30 yards down the field and run the draw with Jabari Small or Dylan Sampson. They get past 5 yards, they're taking it to the house. Like, nobody's going to catch them. They're going to be at full speed by 15, and the secondary is going to be so far downfield trying to cover the deep ball, they won't even realize we've popped one. You're going to see that happen a lot this year. They'll do a lot of decoy routes where they'll just tell all those skill guys, just run verts, just take off, take the defense as far away as you can. All of a sudden, here goes Jabari Small up the middle for a 80-yard gain. You're going to see that a lot.
It's going to be a fun offense to watch. That's for sure. Justin Man in Michigan said Crawford's puking his way to a starting job. That's right. And now they have a shirt about that. I don't know if you might have seen that or not. I saw it on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. That shirt is hilarious. The only 10 you see, she said, I'm concerned about Mincy. He seems pouty and he doesn't have that edge to him. Campbell and Crawford have come in and is looking better. It's very encouraging to hear all the good news about John Campbell. Hopefully that continues. Oh, wow. So Just a Man in Michigan said he's actually in Nashville now. He's UT alum, class 2019. Go Vols. That's what I'm talking about. Back in a good state of Tennessee. Let's see here. Oh, Zach said if we see Gaston Moore, our season is over. Hopefully it's possible. Hopefully it's against, like, I don't know, Akron or something. I don't think we play Akron this year, but we did last year. Hopefully it's against somebody like that.
He'll get some Austin P reps.
Justin Man in Michigan said 4 legit guys at running back plus Khalifa Keith, who looks like an upperclassman already. Yeah, that dude's he's a chiseled dude, man. He has obviously been in the weight room. Caleb Lawncare said, "Hey, Caleb, welcome, buddy. Good to have you." So, hi, Vol Bros. I'm sad that Jefferson chose Bama over us. It's crazy. Yeah, that happened right here in Chattanooga to this afternoon. Amari Jefferson, 4-star wide receiver. Which, here's what's interesting about that: he was committed to Tennessee to play baseball, and then he committed to Alabama today to play wide receiver for them. So that was an interesting one. Zach said it's hard to believe in a guy named Squirrel. I still don't know why there's not an NIL deal with Brown Squirrel Furniture in Knoxville. That still blows my mind that somehow that hasn't happened yet. Look at this one. I love this question. One off-topic question. Are the Vol Bros the most hated YouTube channel in Starkville, Mississippi?
Without a doubt.
Yes, we are. Those dudes do not like us. We still get comments every once in a while about that.
It's amazing. It'll die down for about 7 or 8 days, then all of a sudden one of them will get angry again and post another comment.
And what was so funny was, we did that video talking about what we thought about their season, and then I was like, the next week was SEC Media Days, and all the SEC media picked them to be last in the SEC West, and I was like, apparently it's not just us who think that, and then so I may or may not have stirred the pot again a little bit, but I got back on that long Twitter thread, and I mentioned, so it sounds like I screenshotted the predictions from the media, and I said, sounds like it's not just us guys, like, and they were like, oh, we're not going to believe the media. They picked 8 guys picked Vanderbilt to win the whole, like all this kind of stuff. So I was like, all right, whatever. Yeah, they're not huge fans of us over there. And one guy, he commented on our YouTube video and he said, y'all need to take this off right now before it's too late. And I was like, why would I do that? Like, y'all are talking to us so much on here that, y'all are making the YouTube analytics love us today. Zach said, did I miss something? What did you do to the old man Rebel? So Mississippi State, actually, we predicted them to not have that great of a season. And their fans were not pleased. Yeah. My favorite tweet of all was a guy said, he quoted us something we said, they're like 4-win season or something like that, and then said at the Vol Bros. And he and so that got everybody going. It was fun.
Yeah, we've been tagged in multiple posts in Starkville, Mississippi. It's been interesting to watch.
Okay, fun Starkville story. When I was 10 years old, my Little League baseball team would play the World Series in Starkville, Mississippi. And we stayed in Mississippi State's dorms. And the instructions that were given to us, because this was, obviously before GPS, before MapQuest, anything like that, like we had an atlas in our hand, the State Farm Atlas that was as we're driving down there. And the instructions, the driving directions we were given said, go until the interstate ends. And sure enough, that's what happened. I-59, like it literally, the interstate became an exit ramp in Starkville.
The interstate ends in Starkville.
Yeah. And I remember it was a cool place. I mean, it was cool seeing the football stadium. It's obviously been added onto since then. And so it was so funny. We were driving around one night, just seeing what all there was to do in the town. And we were going down the street and we noticed this parking lot. There were all these cars in this parking lot. And we're like, man, this must be the place to be. And so we go driving up to see what it is. It was a Kinko's, like the photocopy place. And there were people like sitting, there was a cram packed inside the Kinko's. There were people sitting on the hoods of their cars talking in the parking lot of Kinko's. It's a place to be, man. So if you're ever in Starkville, now you know where to go.
I think we're going to get more comments this week.
Maybe so. Let's see. Just a Man in Michigan said, I didn't know they had internet in Starkville. And I'm sure there's a lot of great folks in Starkville too, but there's some folks that are great folks. They're just not huge Vol Bros fans. Let's see. The only thing good about Mississippi State is gone now. Let's see. Our uncle liked X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. He liked that comment. I don't know what else to call it,
The only 10 you see asked a question up there about Alabama and Auburn.
I just saw that one. Off topic here. What's your SEC team predictions today? Why does no one believe Alabama could possibly lose to Auburn at Auburn in their last game of the season? Okay, so here's the thing. Here's my take on that. Literally anything can happen in rivalry games. Literally anything. So do I think it's a high chance that they could lose to Auburn? No, I don't. But 2 years from now, I think it's a whole different ball game, because that would be the third year of Hugh Freeze. That'll be back at home. I certainly think it's going to be a closer game than we might be anticipating, especially right after this season ended. Because by that point in the season, Hugh Freeze is going to have them playing pretty well. There will certainly be nothing like we saw last year. Through the transfer portal and through coaching, they're going to be better.
Yep.
And you do get them at home. And so, it'll probably be a night game if I had to guess, or maybe a 3:30 CBS game. But I just don't think they have the Jimmies and Joes quite yet to compete with Alabama.
Yeah. Auburn's roster looks nothing like Alabama's right now. They can't. Hugh will scheme some stuff up. They'll keep it close for a while, but Alabama will beat the brakes in the second half. But next year,
right?
They're in Tuscaloosa. That'll be a much closer game because if people think Lane Kiffin is the portal king, just wait. Hugh Freeze will spend this entire offseason revamping that roster, and they will become the portal kings of the SEC. If there's a good player out there, they'll be coming to Auburn.
Well, and I think he's gotten 2 5-star commits within the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, he's flipped 2.
They're going to be good,
including a wide receiver that was committed to Alabama. He flipped to Auburn.
So I mean, you give him a year or two, it's a whole different story. Because you're right.
In 2 years, and in Auburn in 2 years, I probably would pick Hugh Freeze.
Because the only 10 you see makes a really good point. Hugh Freeze has beaten Saban twice. He sure has. And he's the kryptonite. They will more than likely be better as a team by the end of the season than they play Alabama harder than anyone.
They'll be better as a team. They'll be better as a team, but it's still roster. The rosters are apples and oranges. It's just not comparable. Auburn has very little talent on that team right now.
But you give them a year and 2 years and everything changes.
Yeah.
Because Freeze has shown that he can have success repeatedly in multiple locations. That's why he's back in the SEC now. And so, and you're exactly right. He's got Saban's number. I don't know what it is, but he's got it. And we saw that when he was at Ole Miss. And so you give him a year or two, that's a whole different story. And Auburn fans have to be excited about the prospect of that. Let's see. Just a Man in Michigan said, how much do you see? Oh, this is a good question. How much do you think Nathan Leacock plays this year? Haven't heard a lot about him, or is he just too buried on the depth chart? You can answer if you want to, Russ, and then I'll give my thoughts.
I think he redshirts. I think they've just got way too much talent on the perimeter. I think he is buried on the depth chart. And honestly, that can be a good thing to redshirt him because at the end of this year, we're definitely losing Brew McCoy and Ramel Keaton. So there's an opportunity there for him to step into a starting role next year and just spend this year learning. It's a tough system for wide receivers. They have a lot they have to learn and they have to do on the fly. And, if they've never played in a system like this, it can take them a while to figure it out.
Well, and to Rustin's point, yeah, he could redshirt this year, but that means he can still play in 4 games because you get 4 freebies. And so, I mean, you're looking at Austin P, I don't know, probably Vanderbilt, games like that. You can get him in the game in those games and get him probably several minutes in those games and still redshirt him. And so he's got 4 games he can enter this year. So I think we will see him. But I don't think, one thing that has been consistent under Josh Heupel is they've got they're not going to sub mid drive. And so those wide receivers that he trusts, he puts them in the game all game long. And so you might see Squirrel White and Dante Thornton rotating in and out. But I guarantee you're pretty much going to see Ramel Keaton and Brew McCoy on every series until they get a substantial lead. And then you'll start seeing Caleb Webb and those guys come in, Chaz Nimrod, those guys. But I do think we'll see Nathan Leacock some this year. He's just a plethora of riches out there. You just got so many guys. Let's see. Douglas Graham. Doug, welcome, buddy. He said, do you see Saban retiring in the next couple of years? Man, that's a good question. He's 71. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere around in there. I think he's 71. As long as he's loving it, I don't think he goes anywhere. I'd say he coaches till he's about 75. And then maybe he might be like, all right, it's time. But
I think he's the only one that knows the answer to that question. I do think it was interesting they bought that house in Jupiter this past week. That was kind of out of nowhere. He spent $9 million on a house in Jupiter, Florida. That was weird, especially weird timing too. Like, why buy a house in Florida the week before practice starts? Because he had to know what kind of publicity that was going to get. So the timing of that was just strange. But I think he's the only person that knows the answer to that question.
So here's a good question from about punt returns. So Just a Man in Michigan said over under 2.5 kickoff return touchdowns for D Williams or punt. Now, if it was just kickoffs, I would say under because people kick the ball in the end zone every time. However, if we're saying kickoff and punts, I'm going to say over because that dude's electric back there. He can find the seam and bam, he's gone. I mean, like he's so much fun to watch. And so if it includes punts, I'm going to say over. But if it's just kickoffs, I'll say under because he's not going to get many chances to return a kickoff. You agree with that, Rustin?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to play 13 games this year, at least. So, the over would just be 3. That's 1 every 4 games. I think he absolutely gets that.
Yeah, including punt returns that's the big deal there. Zach said Saban's going to retire this year when Heupel beats him again right after the game. I love Zach's attitude. It's awesome. It's like, Zach, they need you to come talk to him for a game one time, man. That would be so cool.
I do think there's a little bit of validity in what he's saying, though. Like, just like the Hugh Freeze conversation. Why is Hugh Freeze so successful against Nick Saban? He runs basically the exact same concepts that Josh Heupel does. Why is Ole Miss always in a tight game with Alabama? People forget this, but Ole Miss missed 4 opportunities to score in that game last year and should have beaten Bama. Why is Ole Miss always in the game with them? Because Lane Kiffin's running the exact same stuff Josh Heupel is. Clearly, Nick Saban has an issue with speed offenses. And I almost wonder if what could speed up his retirement is if we beat him again this year and Hugh Freeze gives him a tight game, and who knows, maybe Lane gives him a tight game or beats him. He may say, I'm not fooling with this anymore and walk. I guarantee he'll retire before the next time they go to Auburn because he ain't going to want to go into Auburn against Hugh Freeze with a full roster. That's not going to be to his benefit.
Zach said, Lane Kiffin was kicking himself after that game. Just a Man in Michigan said, what would be the spread for Virginia versus Vanderbilt on a neutral field? Now, what's a funner question to answer there is, what would be the total score, total points scored in that game?
Take the under, whatever it is. Yeah. Take the under.
I like that question. That's good.
They should meet halfway and play each other in Neyland. Since all the Vanderbilt, since all the Virginia fans are already coming there anyway.
Yeah, exactly. They got it marked on their calendar already. So we got one other question that I'm going to present that people, I didn't include this in my top 3 because, people say, oh, that's a stupid question. But it's not yet. Next year, this would have to be on the list. But I'm going to throw this in there for people to think about. One important question that Tennessee has to answer, and really I think it's honestly this year, but definitely no later than next year, is what's the succession plan for Joey Halzle? Because let me tell you right now, that guy ain't going to be around more than 3 years probably. I hope he is. My goodness, I hope he is. He's a tremendous coach. The players love him. I hope he stays a long, long time. But he's so good that I guarantee you he's going to be getting offers within 3 years. I guarantee it. And the reason that this has been such a seamless transition, there's two of them. Number one, it's still Heupel's offense, and he's running the show. That's not going to change. But one reason this has been such a smooth transition, even after Alex Golesh left, was because Halsley's been with them for a long time. So I mean, there was no drop off, there was no learning curve. He knows it. Now they did just pick. Was it Dylan Gabriel? Is that the guy's name? What's his name? I can't think of it.
No, they added Mackenzie Milton.
Mackenzie Milton. There it is. All right. I know he was a former quarterback for Heupel. They did just add him this year, and I wonder if he's the succession plan. They added him as a quality control guy. Halsley's just too good that I guarantee you within 3 years, and here he is the offensive coordinator for what's going to be the number one offense in the country. 3 years down the road, he's going to be getting phone calls. It may even be before that. And they got to have somebody in place ready to go so that it's just a smooth transition. And maybe that's Mackenzie Milton.
I do think the one thing they have going for them, and this was really smart planning on the UT athletic department's part. Joey Halsley is one of the lowest paid coordinators in the SEC. So they've got some wiggle room. He makes half of what Tim Banks makes to be the defensive coordinator. So they've got some wiggle room there. If a group of 5 school, like say Western Kentucky, came calling and said, hey, we want you to be our head coach, they could easily double his salary and be very competitive with that. And honestly, is it better to be an offensive coordinator in the SEC than to be a head coach at a group of 5?
That's a great question, especially now.
Yeah. So I think, question. They've got some flexibility there.
That's a very good question. Let's see. Let's go back to our comments. We had some good ones come through. Just a man in Michigan said, do you think the SEC will expand to keep up with the Big 10, 18, about to be 20? Or will they adopt a philosophy of quality over quantity? I think you're going to see 2 more teams personally. Yeah, exactly. But I think you're going to see 2 more teams. One is, I think it's going to be Clemson and Florida State personally.
I think they'll do. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think they'll do whatever the Big 10 does. If the Big 10 goes to 20, they'll take 20.
I think the first 2 on the radar is going to be Clemson and Florida State because you got, a traditional brand in Florida State that's kind of making a resurgence, and Clemson has been a national power for years now. If they had to go to 20, then you're probably looking at maybe Miami, North Carolina, something like that. Because I think the ACC, I think the schools in the ACC see the writing on the wall. It's not long for the making. What will be interesting is to see, though, what happens to basketball, because the ACC, I mean, you got Duke, Carolina, NC State, just in the Tri-Cities area. You got Wake Forest. You got, all these traditional basketball schools. What are they going to do? But I think we should probably save that for another. We should probably just do a whole episode on just realignment and what could happen, because that's a huge deal.
And speaking of basketball, look how much better the Big 12 just got. I mean, adding Arizona and Utah, that's 2 perennially pretty strong programs coming in the Big 12. And Arizona State's no slouch. They can hold their own. I mean, that's
absolutely
some pretty massive improvements there.
Yeah, the whole deal with the Big 10 now, you got Rutgers will be playing Oregon and Washington.
Yeah.
So it's like basketball season, and they're flying across the country midweek
tennis
while classes are going.
You're going to put your tennis team on a plane and fly them from Eugene, Oregon to New Jersey for a tennis match?
Yeah, nobody's making money on that deal. Nobody.
I mean, this was 100% a football, basketball driven decision. All the minor sports, this is going to be miserable for them.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And I love what Just a Man in Michigan brought up, because these school institutions of higher education, it's like they can't count now. The Big 12 is now the Big 18. The Big 10 is now the Big 18.
Pac-12 is the Pac-4.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Yes. So, thankfully the SEC don't have to worry about that. They can still just say Southeastern Conference, and that's why I do think that if we do see more teams, they will come from probably the ACC, and it'll be teams in the Southeast like Florida State, Clemson. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see. Let's see here. Oh, good question. Great question. Should we be worried about UTSA? Talking heads believe we're overlooking it and it'll be a trap game. 100% agreed. Yes. Worry about them? I don't know about that. But should we be bringing our A game? Oh, yeah, buddy. Absolutely. Because it is a trap game. Because the next week is South Carolina. And everybody's going to be talking about South Carolina coming to Neyland after last year. And UTSA is good. They can put some points on the board. Yes, 100% we should be concerned about that game. And I think the coaching staff knows that too.
So the one thing we do have going for us, and we talked about this a while back, that yes, they absolutely are a trap game. The one thing we do have going for us is their best wide receiver, who probably is going to win the Blitnikoff Award this year, transferred to Ole Miss. And he's now the top wide receiver at Ole Miss. So that changes some things. When your absolute best offensive weapon is no longer on the roster, it changes some things. So I don't think it's as much of a trap game as it was, because that kid's an absolute difference maker. Now, I tell you who's real worried about that kid is Nick Saban, because Ole Miss now has a first-round NFL draft pick at wide receiver that is an absolute stud to go along with their incredible running game. So that was a big deal that he transferred to Ole Miss.
Zach, speaking about the Virginia game, he said right now we're a 27.5 point favorite. I think it'll probably end up being more than that. Let's see. Oh, this is a good point. Justin Man Michigan said Josh Heupel starting to develop an impressive coaching tree. Nobody really wanted Fulmer's assistance at the end. I really hope Alex Golesh succeeds at USF, because if he does, that just, benefits Heupel, makes coaches want to come coach with him and for him. So, that's a good point. Zach said, even though Joey Halsley's a great coach, it's still Heupel's offense, 100%. Absolutely. Heupel's calling the plays this year. Last year, Alex Golesh got to call plays. I think some of the time they said he called the plays, but I think Heupel is still calling some too. We already know that's already been said this year. Heupel will be calling the plays. Let's see. Doug Graham said, how did Clemson and Florida State get out of the grant of rights? Personally, I don't see how they do that.
Pay $120 million.
So it's interesting. All these schools already have contracts in place with television networks, with their own conference, that kind of stuff. And Florida State, their approach to this is fascinating to me. Like, I don't know if they're trying to leverage it. I don't know what they're trying to do, but they are very outspoken and very public. Their board of trustees are publicly saying it's not a matter of if we leave, it's a matter of when we leave. Like, one of their board of trustee members literally said those exact words. I mean, that's not beating around the bush. Like, they're like, we're out, we're gone. And so I think that was a message to Greg Sankey, like, hey, how much you going to give us, kind of stuff. That they're not going to be in the ACC for long. I know whenever their contract's up, at the latest they'll be gone, but I would venture to guess it's going to be 2024, because that's when everybody else is moving. But he straight up said it's not a matter of if we leave, it's a matter of when we leave. Let's see. Go ahead.
Clemson has the same conundrum that every other school does. If they want to leave, they have to pay the $120 million. Florida State can pay the $120 million, but the other thing Florida State has going for it that's interesting is there's a loophole in the grant of rights contract where the state of Florida apparently does this. There's something called state law or state choice law, something like that, where if the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, wanted to, he could put a law in place that would allow Florida State and Miami, as residents of the state of Florida, to leave the ACC. So Florida and Miami actually have a pretty easy way out if they want to, if they can convince the governor to create that law on their behalf. And if he does, they can literally just leave. They can just walk out. And Florida State has actually already retained an attorney to start that process if needed. But if not, they can all always pay the $120 million. And I know that sounds like an insane amount of money, but for some of these schools, it's worth it.
Dester makes a good point. Dester, welcome, buddy. Good to have you. He said, never forget money talks every time. It does. That's right. The only 10 you see was mentioned in that same law that Rustin was just talking about. Brent Fisher. Brent, welcome, buddy. Good to have you. He said, who's the baseball pick in your background? So that actually my son found this autographed Todd Helton photo from his playing days at Tennessee at a local card show. And my 11-year-old saw that, and he thought I'd like that. And he actually said he could put that in his background for Vol Bros podcast. And so he got it for me. It was a really sweet gift. I really, really appreciated that. That was cool. Yeah. Only 10 you see said great minds. Y'all are thinking the same thing. Let's see. Here's a football question. Who has more sacks this season, James Pierce Jr. or Jonathan Josephs? I'm going Jonathan Josephs. That dude, good night. He's so fast off the edge. So I'm going to go him just because of what we saw last year as a true freshman.
Yeah. He's getting talked about a lot too. He's clearly impressing people in practice. His name keeps coming up.
So that's a good segue. So our last question for the night is, what are some encouraging things you've heard from fall camp so far? I've got two that I've heard. Number one, the best reaction I've seen from a coach yet in any of the coaches pressers was on Tennessee's media day, and Tim Banks is up there, and somebody asked him about Omar Norman Lott, and he went, "Ooh, yeah," and he like perked up and he went, "Ooh, yeah." He said we got a great deal out of that one. He said we found a great one there, and he was so excited. He was just like glowing as he talked about him, but his whole countenance changed. Like he was kind of like this, and then he goes, "Ooh, yeah," and he got real excited and looked. So that's very encouraging. Hey, if Omar Norman Lott can come in, and you've got Tyler Barron, Omar Norman Lott, and Amari Thomas, that's pretty good. And then you got Josephs on the other end coming in. That's nice. That's a nice thing to have. The other thing that I thought was so encouraging was actually something that Rustin mentioned earlier today. Our big thing when we talked about our position preview series and we talked about the linebackers was, yeah, they got Keenan Peely and Aaron Beasley. And that's a strong duo to have to start the game. But after that, there's not a lot of proven guys back there. There's some talent, but there's not a lot of proven, people back there. And to hear Austin Price, I've never heard him embellish anything. He shoots straight. Like he doesn't try to make stuff sound better than it is. But to hear him say on their 2-minute drill the other day that linebacker depth has been really impressive, and like that, they started talking about depth, and he immediately talked about the linebackers. And I was like, whoa. That's good news. That's good to hear. So that might be the most encouraging thing I've heard out of fall camp yet, is that the linebacker depth is catching people's eyes. That is huge news for Tennessee, because if they can bring in people and not lose anything after Peely and Beasley, oh my goodness, that is a game changer for Tennessee. What's some encouraging things you've heard, Rustin?
Mine were almost identical, specifically the linebacker depth with Arian Carter and Caleb Perry. I've really been surprised at how much Caleb Perry's name keeps being mentioned. He's clearly taken a massive step because everybody's talking about him. If you go back and watch our defensive line preview video, at one point we talk about when Rodney Garner's really comfortable, when he feels good about his room, he plays 12 guys and they come in waves. He sends them in 4 at a time. I've heard multiple people this week say they're rotating 4 groups of 3 consistently and they're playing 12 guys. That's a huge positive, and every Vol fan should be excited about that, because if Rodney Garner likes his room enough to play 12 guys, that means we've got some dudes. And when he was at Auburn and they were putting 3 and 4 guys in the NFL every year on the defensive line, that's what they were doing. So if he's that comfortable, that's a huge positive.
So let's go back to our comments to wrap up our show here. Let's see. Zach said, "Did you teach him who Todd Helton was?" After he got me that, yes, I did. He had seen, so he found a Todd Helton baseball card, and I told him who he was, that kind of thing, previously, and then he found that photo and got it for me. Zach said he's seen the linebackers on VolQuest looking good. Just a Man in Michigan said, T-Lander's neck looks bigger than my waist. Looks like a grown man already. I mean, that's the thing about these guys is, we've been through folks who had to grow into a linebacker's body over the last decade of Tennessee football. And we're not seeing that right now. These dudes are coming in and, I mean, my goodness, Arian Carter, how in the world is that dude a true freshman? Like that, it's amazing. These dudes look like grown men out there.
Well, T-Lander is now listed at 6'2", 228. 228 on 6'2" is a lot of muscle. Like that.
Absolutely.
That's enormous.
Well, we appreciate everybody joining us tonight. This was a fun show. A lot of good questions. We really appreciate everybody. Just a Man said, watching 27 Vols camp versus 23 is strikingly different. It's insane. Absolutely.
No comparison.
Absolutely. It's interesting to mention that.
Even Tyree Weathersby, like if you saw video footage of him this week getting interviewed, he looks like a 30-year-old man. That kid's a freshman. Yeah. And he's sitting there and I'm going, that's a 7-year NFL veteran. That's not a freshman. On that 2017 team, there weren't many dudes that look like that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was actually thinking about that, watching some of the practice highlights that were being put on YouTube and stuff. And if you remember back in like 2014, especially 2014, 2015, there were so many balls hitting the ground, being dropped and stuff. And I remember, coaching staff saying, we got too many balls on the ground, too many people dropping balls, that kind of thing. That's not happening now. Like you might see 1, maybe 2. And it's different. That's a good way of putting it. It is strikingly different. And that's a good thing. Dester said, as always, great job. Thank you, Dester. We appreciate that very much, man. The only 10 you see enjoyed. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. It's good to hear from you. Good to see you again. You always ask awesome questions. Doug said, good show as always. Looking forward to the next live stream. Hey, thanks, Doug. We appreciate that. Probably the next live stream we'll do, who knows? I mean, we could talk about conference realignment right now, and then next week it's going to be totally different. There'll be another 2 or 3 teams. Florida State may be in the SEC by the end of next week. Who knows? Yeah. So we'll probably do that for our next live stream. But then I'm waiting until the preseason polls come out. I want to see the USA Today poll. I want to see the AP poll, because then we're going to have an episode that somebody mentioned months ago. They said, this is the most hyped Tennessee team since when? And I think that's a great question. And so I'm waiting to see where it comes out in the polls, and then we'll have that show. We'll have that episode. Y'all rock. 3 weeks to go. Go Big Arts. Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
And we've got some fun guests coming up here pretty soon too.
Yep. Reed Carringer's going to join us again, game week. We got a gentleman here in Chattanooga which this is by far and away the most Chattanooga area recruits in one recruiting class that I can remember, maybe ever, coming to Tennessee next year. And it's going to be really fun. He's going to go around and interview. He has a local radio show and podcast here that covers high school football. So he's going to go around and interview those guys. And we've got him lined up to where the day after he interviews them, he's going to join us to talk about those guys that are commits to Tennessee, like Boo Carter, Marcus Gorey, all those guys, Carson Gentle, all these different guys here in Chattanooga. So super excited about what's coming up. It's almost football time. Oh my goodness. It's so exciting. So we hope everybody has a great evening. I hope everybody has a wonderful Sunday ahead of you tomorrow. And we look forward to seeing everybody real soon. Go Vols, baby. Go Vols.